Welcome to the Yash and Zak Sports Hour. I'm Yash Padhye here with my co-host Zak Keilman. We're glad you're tuned in on this sunny but a little chilly Friday, October 21st. And we're back after a week off. We had midterms last week, so we didn't have a show. But we're back this week. How much are you looking forward to this show, Zak?
Hey, I'm happy to be back on, Yash. It was kind of weird last week not having a show, but it feels good this week. Let's get to it. I'm excited.
Yeah, it feels good to get all our testing out of the way and all that pizzazz out of the way. So it feels really good. But, well, ladies and gentlemen, we have quite a show, and we will be discussing Andrew Luck and the Indianapolis Colts. We'll also talk Ball State football's big win over Buffalo last week, 31-21, and we'll preview NFL Week 7 games towards the end of our show. So if you want to join our conversation, make sure to follow us on Twitter at YZSportsHour. Our email is also yzsportshour@gmail.com. You guys can leave comments, questions, concerns. We'd like to hear from you. So, again, our Twitter is at YZSportsHour, and our email is yzsportshour@gmail.com.
Absolutely.
Zach, we'll start off talking about what's wrong with the Indianapolis Colts here, and specifically with Andrew Luck. We'll focus on throughout the second part of our show, but they blew a 14-point lead with 2 minutes and 37 seconds left in the fourth quarter this past Sunday. The Texans in a division game. What do you see in this Colts team that they're struggling so much, especially that defensive unit?
Well, you're touching on it right there. It's honestly, in my opinion, it's the defensive unit. Something, I don't know what it is. I mean, it's been injuries to start the year. They have gotten Vontae Davis back. That was a key injury to begin the season, but they're not sustaining themselves when they're on the field. I mean, you look at the Detroit game, it was a barn burner out there. The Houston game, like we're going to be touching on a lot during this show, they just did not end the game strong. They were up 23-9. It's a 14-point lead. There is no excuse to be giving up 14 points within 6 minutes of the game left. Mm-hmm. Honestly, it's the defensive unit. Andrew Luck's doing honestly all he can with what he's got. And not to mention that the offensive line is not giving him protection either. They're leading the league in sacks given up. I mean, Luck's gone down 23 times to start the season. That's unacceptable for a football team. So honestly, it's mostly defense, though. I'm going to be honest. There's just a lot of breakdowns in coverage, and they're just not holding opponents at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, and they like you mentioned, they have had that defensive unit has struggled. Especially they cut Antonio Cromartie and inside linebacker C.O. Moore after the London game coming back. Mm-hmm. They signed Antonio in August and then cut him. But so it has the defensive unit has had its struggles, and the Colts as a whole have had an up and down season so far. I touched on that London game just earlier here. They went to London. They played the Jacksonville Jaguars. They dug themselves into a early hole, but managed to climb back into it, but they lost the game late, and now they managed. The defensive unit struggled against the Texans, and they blew a game against the Texans. And the Colts, they've won the AFC South 9 times since 2003, and usually this AFC South race we kind of focused around the Colts, but this season the AFC South is wide open. I just read that earlier that Jason McCourty, I read an article on NFL.com that Jason McCourty, who is the twin brother of Devin McCourty, who plays for the Patriots, his Titans, who are 3-3, they're just one game behind the Texans, and he might have, and the Titans and himself, he's only had a one winning season since coming into the NFL, and he might have another playoff appearance with the Titans. So This AFC South race is wide open this year, as it hasn't been as much over the past couple years.
The AFC South is starting to make me think of the NFC East in a sense, because every year as of the last 2 or 3 years, mostly 3, it's not been mediocre football per se, but it's been more competitive. I mean, it's usually been Houston or Indianapolis. However, Tennessee has gotten better as the years have progressed, especially this year. They're already matching their win total from last year.
Yeah.
Jacksonville is actually the disappointment out of the 4, because they were looked at as a kind of like a dark horse to be leading the division right now, because their offense is very powerful. They've been upgrading their defense with number 1 draft picks the last 2 years, along with the fact that they also got Miles Jack in the second round. So they have all the talent. They remind me of the NFC East because it's so competitive. You don't know who's going to win this year. Sure, Houston's 4-2, but if you look at the way that they've been playing in these games, Brock Osweiler almost seems like they overpaid him already. Lamar Miller, up until this past game against the Colts, looked like he was also being kind of just underproducing, really. He finally got himself started off last week. So honestly, I don't really the Colts have won nine of the last several seasons, but you also have to give credit the fact that they had Peyton Manning in some of those, and the AFC South used to be dominated by the Colts and Peyton Manning. Now it's a little more wide open with the Colts having a deteriorated defense and the fact that their opponents are starting to build up their teams.
Yeah. And Frank Gore, and just focusing, like we're talking about the AFC South and just turning that focus again to this division here. Frank Gore in the Texans game. The Colts are 0-2 in the division, by the way. They lost to the Jaguars and they lost to the Texans. And so Frank Gore, though, one positive aspect of that game was that Frank Gore had a 100+ yard rushing game.
That's true.
In that game, so he's the first Colts 100-yard rusher since Trent Richardson in 4 years. So that was a big deal. That's something you can take away as a positive. That defense kind of struggled towards the end of the game, but I think that every game has a positive to it, and I think the Colts should look at it in a way that hey, their running game's back. Their running game is talented. Frank Gore is a monster in the backfield. So, that's something that is positive to look at. But, now turning the focus to Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck, you were talking about how the defense hasn't helped Andrew Luck much, and he did sign a $140 million deal this past summer. But, currently he's not looking like a $140 million man. But I don't blame that solely on him personally, because that's not his fault all the way, the whole way. The offensive line has struggled, although I think the Colts did make a great draft pick in Ryan Kelly, the center.
I can agree with that.
He's been doing really well. And we had Zak Keefer on last April, and he mentioned during draft time, and he mentioned that Ryan Kelly was going to be a good solid pick for him, and he really has. He's really stepped it up, and he doesn't seem like a rookie. He plays more like a third year, fourth year NFL player. So
yeah, for a line that's been struggling all season, this is definitely a bright spot for the Colts. I definitely feel that he's got a great future as a center in this league. I mean, you got him, Anthony Costanzo on there. They're really the two anchors of the line. That they're more of these solid building blocks to protect Andrew Luck. And touching on Andrew Luck's play, if you look at the stat line, they're not bad stats. I mean, over 1,500 yards, 11 to 4 TD to INT ratio through the season.
Yeah.
The issue that's going on, the issue with Andrew Luck and the offense is, yes, it has a lot of weapons, but it also starts out extremely slow. Their sustained drives are usually not coming into the Colts games up until usually halftime or mid to late into the second half. I mean, if looking at the Detroit game, which I actually was at that game, I was high up in the rafters for that, and they couldn't get anything against Detroit. No. Detroit just went on a scoring spree on their defense, which is expected. Indianapolis' defense is not the best in the league, but I mean, Andrew Luck didn't even start looking like Andrew Luck until midway through the third quarter.
Yeah.
Honestly, if he would have been playing that way the whole game, they probably should have won that game instead of losing by a last-second field goal.
Yeah.
San Diego game. They let San Diego take the lead most of that game, and then they took the lead with 1:41 left in the game.
Yeah.
That can't be happening.
That's because of the T.Y. Hilton, Andrew Luck, T.Y. Hilton.
Oh, it was a great, and it was a gorgeous touchdown pass, but these plays should be happening a lot sooner in these football games. You shouldn't be torturing your fans with these slow drives, especially when you have Andrew Luck the last 5 years playing at the elite quarterback status that he's supposed to be playing at. I mean, he's the replacement to Peyton Manning. He's supposed to get them to the Super Bowl, as a lot of fans are hoping for. So you would expect that these drives are more consistent. They're not. And that's one of the issues right now with the Colts. The defense is a bigger issue, but that also is contributing as to why these games are so close.
And, and we're focusing on Luck, and I look at Luck and I think to myself that Green Bay, if the Indianapolis Colts had the offensive line of the Green Bay Packers, I think Luck would be more stable in the pocket. Because if you're watching the Packers and you watched yesterday, the Packers played the Bears, and I know you're a big Bears fan. You might be bummed out about
a little quip for me. A little quip for me. Their season, unfortunately, is a lost season.
Yeah,
reset for next year. But speaking
of that, as I was talking, the Packers. If you watch the Packers and you watch Aaron Rodgers, he's moving around the pocket, but his offensive line is stable. He looks like a rookie this season to me, even though he's been in the league for a while now, But if the Colts had that Green Bay Packers offensive line, Andrew Luck would have more time because he can stay in the pocket. He has good pocket presence.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that this season he has no time, he has to get the ball out, and sometimes he's holding the ball too long. And he's mentioned that some of these sacks that he's acquired, he's got 22 sacks this season, is because he's held the ball too long.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, partially that's not his fault. The offensive line has to block for him because, if he can't find a receiver wide open, he has to wait for the receivers to get wide open. He can't just, when he says set hut, takes the ball and he's not going to throw it, bomb it down the field.
Yeah.
No,
I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, honestly, here's my opinion. The Green Bay line is it's a good offensive line.
Yeah.
You know what if the Colts really want a good line though, I'd take Dallas. Dallas is my first pick. That line, the last half decade or so, they've been stellar, which is also part of the reason why they're contributing to Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott's success. We mentioned, as we had a show about Dak Prescott, of course, but
yes.
we actually never touched on that. But that's one of the keys for them.
Yeah.
That line from Dallas, if Indianapolis could build something like that, that offense would be consistent all the time. Their run game, Frank Gore wouldn't have to worry about just breaking the 100-yard mark on a Sunday night.
Because that offensive line isn't giving him much holes to cut through.
Exactly. I mean, the fact that Frank Gore actually, at the end of regulation, didn't have 100 yards. He had 99 yards to end regulation, by the way.
Yeah.
He lost a yard for a play. But honestly, though, if they had like a better line like Green Bay or Dallas, this would be a different story, I think. But it still would be like one of the teams like Phillip Rivers and the Chargers, where pretty much the offense is carrying the team. Mm-hmm. Still, the line would help, and they probably could have easily had 2 more wins, in my opinion. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the defense is still the glaring issue, even with a better line if they build it up.
Yeah. Now we have focused on this Colts offensive unit and defensive unit, but a lot of these losses, I mean, are shouldered on management, head coach, and GM. And so, let's talk a little bit about Chuck Pagano. Now, we'll expand on that on our second segment of our show. Of course. But, Chuck Pagano and Ryan Grigson, they're signed to an extension last season by Jim Irsay until 2019. And we'll talk to Zak Keefer, our interview, about this as well. But, you think this was a mistake, Zach? You think that Chuck Pagano and Grigson should have been fired last season?
I don't know. A lot of the big thing, a lot of the NFL, it was actually a surprise extension.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of people really thought Pagano was going to go out the door, especially and with Grigson.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to give credit though. Pagano and Grigson put together a team that, with Luck even being injured and having an off year, they still finished 8-8. They were very close still to making the playoffs with this injured squad.
Yeah.
But it shocked me at the end of the season. But I don't know. I don't know if they totally deserved an extension because it's still the defensive unit especially has not been improved. Even I'm a Bears fan and I've watched the Colts knowing that their defense really has not put much improvement into it. I mean, their secondary, which I will touch on in the second half more on this, but a little hint, they're aging. They need to kind of get some more youth into that secondary.
Yeah.
I mean, your strong safety is 35 years old and probably is going to be retiring soon.
Yeah.
The guys Mike Adams is wearing down.
Yeah.
But I mean, honestly, this is kind of a front office thing. I don't really think they should have been brought back, even though they salvaged an 8-8 year, especially with the internal turmoil in the team. I think they probably should have been let go.
But a lot of players like Vontae Davis and Vontae Davis, Joe Reitz, and those guys, they expressed gratitude toward Pagano, and they wanted him to come back. And there was a hashtag on Twitter during that time last year in January, hashtag Chuck Strong. And so it was like, and I think, personally, I think Jim Irsay brought him back. I don't think that Grigson should have been brought back, but I think Pagano, the players like him. He's a player's coach. He kind of reminds me of a Rex Ryan in a way. We talked about Rex Ryan a couple weeks ago.
Yes, we did.
But he reminds me of a Rex Ryan in a way. He's a player's coach, and a lot of players like him for his attitude and what he does. So I can see where they would bring Pagano back, but Grigson, I'm kind of on the fence about that.
I can agree. I can respect that. That makes sense.
Yeah. So, well, when we come back, we'll talk more about Andrew Luck and the Colts, and we'll have our interview with Zak Keefer, the Colts reporter for the Indy Star. Stay with us. You're listening to the Yash and Zak Sports Hour on WCRD 91.3, the pulse of Ball State. Welcome back to the Yash and Zak Sports Hour. We're currently discussing Andrew Luck and the Colts. Now, Zach, as we do on all of our shows, we did this last year. We've been continuing this trend throughout this year. We try to go back and look at the past of some of these players and some of these teams to understand the present and what they're going through now. Similarly, we're talking about Andrew Luck. We focused on Andrew Luck for most part of that first segment. So continuing that, Andrew Luck's past, he spent most of his childhood in Germany. His father was a coach for NFL Europe. He founded a team in Germany there. So he spent most of his time in Germany and then London. And that's why he claimed the Jacksonville game in London as a homecoming for him. And he goes back to London multiple times during the off season. So, but he did come to the United States. His first football memory, he claimed, I read on an ESPN.com article that his first football memory was a VHS, which VHSs are ages ago. But,
I know. Fun fact, VHS actually just ended production this year for all of you out there, if you didn't know that. But anyway, continue.
So, he watched football. He fell in love with it instantly, and he used to like soccer and all the soccer, which was football there in Germany and London. But he came to the United States, went to Stanford. He was considered to be drafted first overall in the 2011 NFL draft, but he decided to stay one more year at Stanford, and he was drafted first overall in 2012 by Indy, as we know. We know the story from there.
Oh yeah.
4 years. He's been to three. He's been to the playoffs 3 times. That one playoff game, especially the playoff game that I really like, that Andrew Luck really showed poise in, was the Chiefs game where they came back in the fourth quarter.
I was gonna say, if you're a Colts fan, that's kind of like that's in your memory bank forever. If you watch that game, it's unforgettable.
Yeah, and so and Indy did look good for those couple of years. They lost to Baltimore in the wild card game his rookie season. They lost to, I think, New England or Houston in the divisional game, and then New England in the Deflategate scandal 2 years ago. But what do you think? And we talked about that defensive unit, but do we shoulder most of the blame on Luck for their struggles this last 2 seasons?
I don't know about all. I don't really know about all of it. If you're talking last 2 seasons, I mean, the Colts were successful enough 2 years ago to get to the AFC Championship game. Credit, they fell apart against New England, but that's not all his fault. I mean, honestly, 2 years ago it was his best year, and then last year it's not totally his fault. However, he started the season poorly, I will say. This was even before he was injured and had a lacerated kidney.
Yeah.
So last year something just was not ticking right, but it's not all his fault. Honestly, still the team just they've not built a team around him, per se.
Yeah.
Luck is supposed to be Luck, from what you see when you watch these games, he's supposed to be the cornerstone and the leader of this team. Yeah. When you think the Indianapolis Colts, you think Andrew Luck, and then Luck uses his skills to help progress the team's success. And quite frankly, Ryan Grigson, honestly has just not done enough to build up around him, particularly like we've been talking about. And it sounds repetitive at this point, but the defense for the Indianapolis Colts has been a topic of issue the last 2 or 3 years because the talent has kind of been there, but not totally. They've had they've had some excellent players. Jarrell Freeman for several years that he was there. Now in Chicago, he was one of them steady middle linebackers for the group, kind of the leader of the defense at that point. Now it's DeQuell Jackson.
Yeah.
Obviously Vontae Davis has been one of the better AFC cornerbacks when he has been healthy. And we've heard greatness from Mike Adams, obviously, but they haven't built much more around it. Most of the defense is kind of deteriorated just because of age-wise.
Yeah. Or
that the talent has not been drafted. It's not been like well-scouted talent as well.
But I know we're putting a lot of emphasis on that defense. But Pagano did say a couple weeks ago that, quote, "We have a good defense," but the last 2 weeks that defense hasn't shown up, and again they've cut a couple players, Cromartie and Moore, and I think particularly specifically the spot on the defense that really needs work is that corner spot where they cut on Antonio Cromartie and they had Darius Butler with Vontae Davis as their two corners, but that corner spot with Butler has struggled a little bit these last couple of games. So what do the Colts need to do specifically on a defensive, and that defensive end spot also has been the defensive end has struggled as well. So what do the Colts need to do on that defensive end spot, and specifically also on the corner spot to play better? What do you think these corners need to do?
Well, the corners, honestly Vontae Davis is the anchor for those corners. Okay, he's the all-star in that secondary. But they're like I keep saying though, it's an aging secondary, quite frankly. Deion Butler, he's 30.
Yeah.
Davis is 28. He's got a few years left.
Yeah.
28 is still technically young, but that's also starting to get to the point where it's aging. Again, Mike Adams is 35.
Yeah.
And you should start to develop these players that are behind them. Some of these players aren't going to be around forever, as well. Robert Mathis last year was also kind of aging, injuries as well, plagued his season. It's just building up more talent, scouting better talent through the draft. They keep on having these younger guys as on the bench. One of the safeties, Matthew Farley, he's 24. He's fresh out of the draft been out of the draft for only a few years.
Yeah.
These players need to start being developed and kind of getting to know the system better and showing their athleticism more. The secondary issue is just that there's age. Vontae Davis can't do everything.
Yeah.
Okay. Mike Adams is aging and can be injury prone. He can't do everything as well.
Yeah.
Some of these younger guys need to start stepping up for this Colts defense, because if you keep on this path that they've been going on the last 2 or 3 years, this defense is going to stay the same or just progress worse than it is right now.
Yeah.
And then as for the defensive line, it's pretty much the same thing. Age and scouting better talent.
But again, the reason we're putting so much emphasis on this defense is because that has been the struggling point of this Colts team this season, and it really showed the last couple games in London against Jacksonville and against the Texans, especially in those two divisional games. So, but we had our own opinions about Grigson and Pagano, but how likely is it, Zach, that they keep their jobs? Because I think that if they pull themselves out of this hole, again, the AFC South is wide open. So, if they can pull themselves out of this hole, make the playoffs, and make a deep run in the playoffs, potentially make the Super Bowl, because that's what Jim Irsay talked about. Is I think he's really hungry for that Super Bowl experience again, and getting back there. And they had good shots the first 3 seasons with luck, but the last 2 seasons they've kind of regressed. So how likely is it that Grigson and Pagano keep their jobs come January or February, whenever their season ends.
I give Pagano more of a chance. Honestly, the players like him. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, he's been through a lot, and he's shown some toughness, and he knows how these guys play. Honestly, Grigson is probably the one I would be most concerned for keeping his job.
Yeah.
Just because, as I've been touching on, the talent has not been the best for the defensive side. And also, even before they drafted 5 linemen last year in the draft, you know, their offensive line has not been great for helping Luck. Mm-hmm. Grigson, in my opinion, he is more likely to be on the hot seat right now for the way that this roster is performing. And some of the transactions, in my honest opinion, letting go of Jarrell Freeman earlier this past season at middle linebacker, that didn't help at all.
Yeah,
honestly, that should have been an instant re-signing. There should have been nothing to wait on that because Freeman has been consistent each of the seasons.
He's with the Bears.
Exactly, and he's playing just as well at Chicago.
Yeah,
right next to J.H. Trevathan.
Yeah.
But each of his first seasons in Indianapolis, he recorded 100 tackles or more.
Yeah.
That's really good for a middle linebacker.
Yeah.
That's one of the tops in the NFL. I mean, you can't just let a talent walk like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, decisions like that and some of the draft decisions, it's not looking good for Grigson, I would say. I definitely would say that he is more on the hot seat at the end of this season.
Mm-hmm. So, earlier this week, we caught up with Zak Keefer, the Indy Star beat reporter for the Indianapolis Colts, to discuss that struggling defense, Chuck Pagano, and Ron Grigson's future, and Andrew Luck. So, without further ado, here's the interview with Zak Keefer.
We have Zak Keefer here with us today on the Yash and Zak Sports Hour. Zak Keefer, as many of you know, works for the Indy Star. He's a beat writer for the Indianapolis Colts. Zak, how are you doing this fine evening?
I'm great. How are you guys?
We're doing fantastic. I'm very looking forward to this interview, sir. Let's kick it off, shall we? So, to begin our line of questioning, we're going to start with last Sunday night as we watched the Colts collapse essentially on national television. Up by 14, the defense basically buckled. The offense could not sustain a drive to end the game or could reach field goal range in overtime. Which side of the ball has more of the blame for Sunday night's loss?
I think that's pretty obvious. The defense blew it. They allowed a 14-point lead to evaporate in a little over 3.5 minutes against a team that really wasn't doing much on the offensive side of the ball for most of the game. Mm-hmm. So for this one, it falls squarely on the on the defense's shoulders. We talked to defensive coordinator Ted Monachino today, and he knows it. He knows the defense just simply has not been good enough this season, and that's the truth. The problem is we're 6 weeks in, and it's the same stuff over and over. It's the missed tackles, the missed blocks, the lack of a pass rush, the missed coverages. So that's why they're 2-4 right now.
Hey, it makes sense. As with the defense, though, the offensive line has also been a glaring issue besides the defense. To begin the year, it has been a pretty big struggle. The line has actually given up the most sacks in the NFL, 23 so far. Andrew Luck seems like he does not have really any time to even set himself up in the pocket. Over the past 5 drafts alone, the Colts have drafted 10 offensive linemen. Looking at this, is this issue still even fixable? I mean, I know it's been a topic for several years now, or is this just a problem with scouting?
Yeah, no, it's fixable. And I think they're on their way to fixing it. I know it's going to take some time, and you're not going to see results right away. This team drafted 4 offensive linemen in April's draft. I mean, you just never see that. But look, they're 4 rookies, and in one game this year they started 3 different rookies on the right side of the line: center, right guard, and right tackle. That's almost unheard of in this league, and you're going to take your lumps. Period. It's just going to happen. So they've got a new offensive line coach in Joe Philbin. He's working them hard. The results are not there right now. They obviously lead the league in sacks. And they're on pace for 60 or more, which is, historic numbers, some of the most ever. But you don't see the progress unless you look real closely. These are young guys playing in new positions, playing against really good defenses. The Bears' front seven's good. Houston's really good. Whitney Merciless just lived in the backfield. There is progress. Joe Haig is a guy they really like at that right tackle spot. Denzel Good has been okay. He's been up and down at right guard. And then Ryan Kelly has really been solid at center. That's what you expect from a first-round draft pick. But there has been progress. It's hard to see. The problem is they're 2-4, and then obviously the offensive line issues are not helping.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the next question that I had, Zach, we finally got the issues fixed. Luck has had a rebound season even with the offensive line woes. He's had 11 for TD to INT ratio along with 1,500 passing yards so far. These numbers are great. I mean, if you're a Colts fan, but is Luck carrying this team in a similar way as Drew Brees and Phillip Rivers with the defense slumping?
Yeah, he really is. And then there's only so much a quarterback can do. That's sort of the beauty of football, right? Is you can have one great player, but if you don't have a good team, you're not going to go anywhere. And the Colts have a couple good players, but the problem is two of them are the punter and the kicker. So
right.
He's been great, but the defense just hasn't gotten it done. They know that. There's no other way to put it. You don't have to be an expert to realize that. Andrew Luck's having a really good season. The one thing we haven't seen too frequently are the bonehead plays, and those are his words he likes to use. There was a really bad throw he made late in the second quarter Sunday night in Houston. We really haven't seen too many of those, and that was really his calling card the first couple of years. For all the great plays he made, he would always make one or two just dumb plays early in his career, and he's really worked on those with the new quarterback coach, Brian Schottenheimer, and he's really reduced those. So he's been great. I think the Colts are 4-2. You're talking about him being an MVP candidate. The problem is the defense hasn't closed out two games. The first week to the Detroit Lions and this week in Houston, and that's why they're 2-4, and nobody's going to win an MVP if you're 2-4.
Exactly. And we keep mentioning the defense throughout this, which actually leads into our next question here, because as we mentioned, the defense has kind of it's not been great this year, to say the least. There's probably other words you could put it, but it's also been ravaged by injuries early on in the season. And along with these injuries, you've also seen that it coincides with the gashing of yards that's been going on with some of these games. I mean, a lot of analysts are surprised that Chicago was even to gain 500 yards of offense with Brian Hoyer leading the offense. I mean, there are injuries this year, but is this also a result of the Colts just not building up the defense over these last several drafts and just kind of letting it stay the same?
Yeah, it's a combination of that and the free agent misses. We all know who those are. LaRon Landry, and Darrell Freeman walked last year in free agency, and Art Jones hasn't done all of much. He's been injured, but the misses just keep adding up. Jajon Smith, he's a third-round pick in 2015, and he's not even on the team right now. So that means you got to spend money on Patrick Robinson, and so it's not the domino effect. And that's what they had the chance to build a great defense while Andrew Luck was on his rookie deal, making only $5 or $6 million a year, as compared with the 23 he's making right now. They didn't do it, period. And you're seeing the results right now, and it's just clear as day. They missed on all those guys in free agency and the draft, and that's why their defense is ranked 31st in the league right now.
Absolutely.
And so we're talking about the defense and the Colts as a whole, but I want to now turn the focus to Chuck Pagano and Ryan Grigson. They were given contract extensions at the end of last season, and the way the season has started, though, can Pagano and Grigson turn the ship around for the Colts in the coming future, or do you think that Jim Irsay made a mistake in signing them to an extension for another couple years?
Well, there's not much more Ryan Grigson can do at this point this season. If you're a GM, your roster is just about where you want it to be for week one. I mean, he's going to add guys at the end of the roster, and he's going to, pick up Chase Kaufman like he did a couple of days ago at the tight end when Dwayne Allen goes down. But really your main backbone of your team is put together. So you're either going to like what you got or you're not going to like it. Chuck Pagano's got to do a better job. I mean, there's no question about it. This team is not closing out games. He questioned their killer instinct on Sunday night. Then he backed up on those comments on Monday. But look, I mean, it's come down to the fourth quarter every time, 6 times. It's been a one-score game with 3 minutes left, 6 weeks in a row, and they've only won 2 of those. Partly because their defense is terrible, partly because they can't finish. partly because whatever you want to call it, they don't have that killer instinct like you said. But they need to. I've never been in a locker room like I was Sunday night in Houston. They were just absolutely stunned. I mean, I've been in locker rooms where they lost by 38 points to New England that weren't this bad because of the way they lost Sunday night. They were just absolutely stunned.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the thought went through their mind for the first time that maybe we're not that good. So they got to get a win in in Tennessee on Sunday. Otherwise, it's going to be a really long flight home, and I'm not sure who the coach is next week if they lose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just going off of the fact about extensions and all of that, Andrew Luck, he was given a $140 million deal with $87 million guaranteed money this offseason, made him the highest paid player in the NFL. But as the season has progressed, owner Jim Irsay, he's talked about how Luck needs to change his style of play and how he's not a 22-year-old kid at Stanford. And he's also talked about how Luck needs to improve on his turnovers. But so do you think that Jim Irsay gave Luck his deal too early? Do you think they should have waited?
No, not at all. That's a deal you sign, and you're thrilled to sign it. I mean, that's a problem every GM wants, right? To have that franchise quarterback you don't have to worry about. It's the toughest thing to get in sports as a franchise quarterback. Ask the Cleveland Browns. I think they're on their 26th quarterback since moving to Cleveland back in 1999. So they knew this day was coming. They were thrilled about it. They should be happy that he doesn't want to go play somewhere else that actually has an offensive line that can keep him upright, or a defense that doesn't allow 35 points a game or whatever. So, no, absolutely. You pay Andrew Luck that contract. You say whatever you want, you can have, and you're thankful that you have the opportunity to do so.
All right. Well, Zach, we thank you for your insight on the Yash and Zach Sports Hour, and we thank you for joining us. Appreciate you taking your time out of your day.
Always a pleasure having you on the show, Zach.
Thanks for having me, guys. Have a good one.
Yep.
Yeah, you too.
You as well. Well, that was Zak Keefer, the Indy Star beat reporter for the Indianapolis Colts, talking about that defense for the Colts, Chuck Pagano and Andrew Luck's $140 million deal with $87 million guaranteed for Luck with that deal, and Zak Keefer discussed that with us. Mm-hmm. But when we come back, we'll talk James Gilbert's big day last Saturday against Buffalo, 246 yards, second most leading rusher in school history, and we'll talk BSU football's big 31-21 win against Buffalo. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Yash and Zach Sports Hour on WCRD 91.3, the Pulse of Ball State.
Welcome back to the Yash and Zach Sports Hour. We are glad you tuned in. The Ball State football team had a big win last weekend at Buffalo. James Gilbert especially was the star of the show for that game, carrying the rock 34 times, totaling 264 yards with 2 touchdowns. How much of an impact do you think James Gilbert will have for the future for these Cardinals?
Well, yeah, Zach, I think that James Gilbert will have a big impact for the Cards. He's already had 854 yards this season through 7 games. So, there's no doubt he's going to hit the 1,000-yard mark this season. And I think that at the beginning of the season, there was a battle in the backfield between Teddy Williamson, the senior, Darren Green, the junior, and Gilbert. But I think James really has stepped it up these last couple games, and he's really fought for his spot as the primary back. And I think he's going to have a big impact for him. He's only a sophomore, so he's got 2 years left to go. So I think that he's really going to have a big impact for him. And like I said, he should have no doubt reaching that 1,000-yard rushing mark this season.
You know who he reminds me of? You remember, I don't know if you've heard of a fellow by the name of Jawan Edwards, who is actually the school's leading rusher now for school's football history. Mm-hmm. I had the pleasure to watch him at least 1 year. In my freshman year, 2014, when he was a senior, when he broke the Ball State rushing record.
Yeah.
Very powerful runner. Could make defenders miss very easily. Knew where to hit the hole. I see a lot of that in James Gilbert, actually.
Yeah.
Very powerful runner. Knows where the holes are. Has really excellent vision on the football field. Mm-hmm. He's going to be a star for sure for these Cardinals. He'll be a centerpiece of this offense. And honestly, I think if he keeps up this pace the way he's going, he's already a sophomore, but I think he can actually get the school rushing record at the end of his tenure.
Yeah. And, I think that James, not only is he a good rusher, but I think he complements that offense with his rushing game because Riley Neal, the sophomore quarterback, he's had a total of 6 TDs and 8 interceptions this season, which isn't a great stat for a quarterback. And he threw for 212 yards and 2 INTs against Buffalo last week. So I think that Ball State really has turned, and Mike New, the first-year head coach, really has turned to James Gilbert as a focus, and I think that he's had to carry much of the weight for this team, and I think he's done a great job, and I think he compliments because, when Riley Neal isn't doing so great, the Cardinals are able to rely on their rushing game to finish out games and to close out.
Yeah, now coming up this week, I don't know how many of you've heard, but it's homecoming here at Ball State.
The bed races were today.
Yeah, exactly. Bed races were at noon. I was actually there. An excellent race today. Congratulations to all who won, if you're listening. But we have the game, obviously, and this homecoming, we have Akron coming into town. Kind of a similar situation. 4-3 Akron facing 4-3 Ball State. Both teams are looking to make a bowl game, and this is a crucial game for both of them. Whoever wins this game is one game closer to bowl eligibility.
Yeah.
It's going to be a tough one. And Josh, what do you think will be the key for Ball State coming into this game? I mean, we obviously Gilbert we've talked about, but
yeah.
I mean, do you think Riley Neal just needs to take more of a step?
I think that offense, Riley Neal, he needs to stay calm in that pocket. I think he gets a little jittery sometimes, and he has some nerves at the beginning of the game. But I think that if he can start off the first half, because his first half performance hasn't been great so far this season. Against Georgia State, he had 2 interceptions back-to-back in the first half. He had a couple back-to-back interceptions at first play from scrimmage at the Indiana game, the pass to Corey Loncanario, which was a fumble, had a couple turnovers there. I think that if this offense can get to a hot start early on, I think that's what's going to help them. And like we were talking about the Colts, where we shouldn't have games where you have to make those big plays at the end to survive and win. You should be making those plays early on, and I think that if this offense has a hot start, then they're on the pace to have a big win against Akron. And not only that, and we're focused on James Gilbert, and we focused on this offense a lot through this segment, but I think that this defense, Anthony Winbush and those guys have done an excellent job. Sean Wiggins, Anthony Winbush, and with getting to the quarterback. And I think that the key to this game is for the Cardinals just to get to Thomas Woodson, their quarterback for the Akron Zips, and get as many sacks as possible. Because I think if you pressure the quarterback, then it's shown that if you pressure the quarterback, he's not going to make very accurate throws. And so I think we just need to get pressure up front.
Absolutely. Yes, and obviously the seems like the Ball State, their regular trend every week is usually get about 28 to, I would say like 21 to 31 points.
Yeah.
That sounds like a fair number.
Yep.
I mean, that's a good number, but also the defense has kind of allowed teams to stay in the game. Much improved, though. Not knocking the defense. Compare it to the last 2 seasons that I have seen them. This is a much better defense overall, especially if you're in the flow of going back and forth of being the sack leader in the NCAA.
Yeah.
So
Ball State leads the country.
They still do. They still do. So as you can see, that they're no slumps here. I mean, these guys will go after the quarterback.
Yeah.
And obviously, as you touched on, Thomas Woodson will definitely have some issues. Now he's no Cooper Rush though.
No.
I'll admit.
No.
Woodson has some interesting stats. Still 13 to 4 TD ratio, pretty nice. About 1,200-ish yards.
Yeah.
So
1,247 yards.
Exactly. So they're good stats. Still, Cooper Rush, I will admit, has been the best quarterback they played so far.
Yeah.
At least until we get to Western Michigan, but
yeah,
that's for a later date.
Yeah.
I mean, getting Woodson will definitely help. Obviously, stopping the run game. Ball State's been pretty good at stopping the run.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't seen with the exception though of Northern Illinois with Maddie, but Woodson is not a running quarterback. He's pretty similar to rush and stay in the pocket.
Yeah.
Find the receiver and complete the reception.
And Ball State has done really good job with penalties as well. I think if they can stay out of getting penalties, that's going to be a big factor for them too, because Ball State throughout the season has had 24 penalties for a total of 203 yards, and their opponents have had 48 penalties for a total of 427 yards. So they've had half as many penalties as their opponents there. So that's a good positive sign if you're a Cardinals fan, saying the penalties that this team is getting.
Exactly.
What Mike New has done with this team is really well, and in his first season head coach, he can take him to a bowl game, and that'll be really big for the fans here in Muncie.
Yeah, a lot of us Cardinals fans really want to see a bowl game. Ball State has never won a bowl game.
No,
they have been defeated in each one. Last time the Cards were in the bowl game was actually when Wenning was in town.
At the GoDaddy Bowl at the Tropicana Field in St. Petersburg.
Many of us remember it. Many of us also, if you want to look farther back, 2006, Ball State was ranked in the top 15 in the country going into the MAC championship game, losing to Buffalo. And then they would lose the bowl game ensuing after that championship game. So, I mean, Ball State's had successful teams, but for some reason, there's a good feeling about this season, especially coming off the last 2 years of kind of mediocre play.
Yeah.
I mean, you go 5-7, 2 years ago, and you're like, okay, this is pretty close. We can build on this. You have Jack Miles behind center, and then all of a sudden, coming to next year, and Pete Lembo seemed to not improve the team. But Mike New has definitely done. He's doing something special here.
Yeah.
Fans are coming.
And they've already surpassed their win total. From last year.
Yeah, I mean they're already 4 wins.
Yeah.
I mean, with the exception of some blown leads.
Yeah.
They've been relatively great as a football team in the MAC. But I mean, you see, there's a different feel around here. Students are going back to the stands. They're watching these football games. They know the Ball State's good. That's what the school has been needing for the last 2 years. Yeah. To finally get some attendance, to have a home field advantage that truly feels like a home field advantage.
Yeah.
And as a radio anchor myself, I am hoping Ball State is able to get more home games in the coming years. We only have 5, of course, this year.
Yeah.
Just scheduling wise, but I'm hoping we get back to 6.
Yeah. And this Cardinals team has really improved under the direction of Mike New, and just they lost to CMU Central Michigan 21-24, which is really good that they were able to stay in that game with Cooper Rush and the things that he's been able to do, getting in and out of the pocket. He's been very accurate, and so I think that defense did a really good job handling Cooper Rush, and the team did a really good job playing and keeping up with Central Michigan.
Especially the second half of that game.
Yeah.
I mean, you and me were sitting in the studio along with our other producer friend, Alex, who we very much enjoy having it with us. And I mean, the defense, Mike New was able to get that defense going and charge them up at halftime, because coming out of half, Cooper Rush could not even figure out where the pressure was coming from. We had Wimbush coming off the side, and we had Posley as well. I mean, it was a sack fest, as we could say. And if they come out like that against Akron, that'll be 5. It'll be 5 wins.
Yeah.
Which means you pretty much have to steal one more win for eligibility.
Yeah.
I mean, most of us fans here just want eligibility. If we can get a 6-6 record, that's a successful season.
Yeah.
And so we're all looking very much forward to the rest of this year.
Yeah.
But it's homecoming, people. It's a great time to be a Ball State Cardinal.
Yeah.
Saturday's going to be fun. Got the parade, got the 5K, and then we got the game.
Yeah.
It's going to be an excellent time. You and me are going to be in the studio producing that game, and I'm looking very much forward to it.
Yep.
But we're going to move on to our final segment of the show with 10 minutes left here, 7:50 here at WCRD. When we come back, we are going to we're going to go into the NFL, and we are going to look into what our top games are going to be for this weekend, and we'll kind of analyze a few other key matchups that we could see that could probably change the balance of the NFL coming into this week 7. It is. So when we come back, we will let you guys know. This is us at the Yash and Zak Sports Hour on WCRD 91.3, the pulse of Ball State. Welcome back to the Yash and Zak Sports Hour. And now we will preview the NFL Week 7 games for you. Yash, What is your go-to game for this week? There are plenty of interesting ones on the schedule.
Yeah.
What is yours that you want to tell the fans out here what we're looking for?
I'm looking forward to the Browns-Bengals game, and
Really?
I'm looking forward to this game because I used to watch the Bengals this last couple seasons. I know Hugh Jackson was the offensive coordinator there for the last couple seasons, and now he's with Cleveland. They're 0-6, and they're coming into the jungle, as we like to call it in Cincinnati.
Fair enough.
I just want to see how Hugh Jackson and how he's made this Browns team and how he fares against his old boss Marvin Lewis, because he was the offensive coordinator there for a while, and now he got a head coaching job this past offseason with the Browns, and they looked for him to change up the attitude in Cleveland. And when he came in to Cleveland, he said, I know what the AFC North is like, and we're looking to win the Super Bowl, but they're 0-6 at this point, so their playoff hopes look bleak. But I want to see how Hugh Jackson does against his old boss.
Yeah, it's curious. I mean, especially Marvin Lewis had some interesting comments about Hugh Jackson coming up to this game.
Yeah.
Quote unquote, I miss him. I mean, obviously Cincinnati has been also reeling this year.
Yeah.
They're 2-4. No, after having several years, 6 straight years, I believe it is, of going to the playoffs. It's starting to. I think Cincinnati fans are starting to worry about this squad. So this is an intriguing game. Cleveland has shown a lot of potential. Mm-hmm. Cody Kessler looks great. We've been talking about Terrell Pryor, you and me, most of the week. He's been an excellent.
Wide receiver / quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, considering that this was an Oakland Raiders quarterback that showed some talent quarterback, but now is like an elite receiver, it's impressive.
He's like Braxton Miller coming out of Ohio State as a quarterback, and now he's a rookie wide receiver.
He's even played quarterback this year for the Browns.
Yeah.
They've had 5 starting quarterbacks already this year. It's insane. But I mean that's gonna be an interesting game to watch. Cleveland's always in these games. They have been, with the exception of New England 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But they are a feisty team looking for a win, so I can see that. Look at the schedule here. My intriguing game of the week. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of good ones out here. Just because we've been talking about the Colts today, I'm going to go with Indianapolis and Tennessee. And here's why. Because Indianapolis, they're off a crucial loss against Houston.
Yeah.
Like we said earlier, 14-point deficit that they gave, or lead that they gave up.
Yeah.
They're 2-4, but they're still in the hunt right now.
Yes, because the AFC South
is very tight,
wide open.
And that's mostly not even why I'm intrigued. I'm curious to see, is Tennessee a legit football team?
Yeah.
They're 3-3. They've tied the win amounts that they've had from last year. But can they beat Indianapolis? Indianapolis is still no slump.
No.
Their offense is still high powered when they get going. Mm-hmm. But I love the exotic smash mouth that Mike Mularkey has going for Tennessee with Derrick Henry and especially DeMarco Murray.
Yeah.
And Mariota these last 2 weeks is finally coming into his own.
Yeah.
He's starting to look like he was the better pick over Jameis Winston. And
I think that the Colts. It's funny you mentioned the Colts-Titans game. I think the Colts have to win this game.
Yes.
It's a must-win for the Colts to keep their playoff hopes alive, because I read an article on ESPN earlier this week that if Tennessee beats the Colts season is effectively almost over.
Yeah,
so
it's kind of hard to come back from a 2-5 start.
Yeah.
Unless
you were the Chiefs a couple seasons ago, they started 1-4.
Anything.
Andy Reid brought them back, and
anything is possible in the NFL. Andy Reid, though, that's a special coach.
Yeah.
By the way, that man knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
But absolutely, I can't agree with you more. This is a must-win game for Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, this is going to be really hard. They'll definitely need a string of luck here. Funny how I say luck, but they'll need a string of luck to stay in the South then, because 2-5, it doesn't look pretty for teams that are trying to go to the playoffs 2-5. Their defensive woes would be enough to probably keep them away from that, from a playoff berth. Mm-hmm. But that's an interesting game. I know I mentioned the Colts as my interesting game. I do have a side one that I kind of feel silly for missing over this. Minnesota and Philadelphia.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is Sam Bradford coming back to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And any NFL fan who follows the league very well knows the type of season that Sam Bradford had last year.
Yeah.
It was not pretty. But
he's been doing great with Vikings. I think that trade was like a reawakening for him.
Something about Norv Turner's offense has changed that man to go back to what he looked like when he came out of Oklahoma. It is outstanding at the transformation he's had, especially without Adrian Peterson in the backfield. They've had Jerick McKinnon and Matt Asiata. I hope I pronounced that right.
Yeah.
They've had both of those guys.
And I have McKinnon on my fantasy team. He's giving me a lot of points.
Because rightfully so. That if you're a fantasy owner, I would think you would definitely want McKinnon.
Yeah.
You know that. I feel silly that I missed this one.
Yeah.
You know, because that is an intriguing game just for Bradford coming back.
And you talk about Bradford coming back to Philly, but there's also another homecoming with Brock Osweiler coming back to Denver.
Oh my gosh!
On Monday Night Football.
We're not doing our jobs here.
So that's another game that I would like to watch is the Texans Broncos game where Brock Osweiler is going to come back and face his old team. Now, in retrospect, that Peyton Manning isn't going to be there.
Right.
It's going to be Trevor Siemian.
Right.
Because,
absolutely.
Paxton Lynch didn't do so hot in the game against Atlanta.
Well, and then Trevor Siemian didn't. That Thursday night game that he had last week.
No,
he
struggled.
I mean, whatever happened to the Trevor Siemian that was that played before he got injured.
That started the season off.
Yeah, I mean, something went wrong coming off that week.
Yeah.
But,
now Brock Osweiler has thrown 8 TDs and 8 interceptions this season, so I think they did overpay him with the $72 million deal. But I mean, that's for the Texans and their organization to decide.
Yeah. You do have to be worried as a Houston fan seeing Brock Osweiler's production, especially when you're paying that man that much money.
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane. It's pretty up there. It's one of the better deals in the NFL right now.
Yeah.
And this is coming from a guy that's watched the Bears give Jay Cutler a deal of $126 million for 7 years, with him being paid $22 million in one of those first years.
Yeah,
it's kind of mind-boggling, but that game is intriguing also because these defenses still are some of the best in the NFL. Osweiler has been struggling, but he showed his capabilities in Indianapolis.
Yeah,
Trevor Siemian obviously has shown that he can play well, but he slumped last week. So curious to see how that goes. Can Brock Osweiler stick it to John Elway? Can John Elway prove to the world that he was okay with letting go of Brock Osweiler?
Yeah.
We'll find out on Monday night.
Monday Night Football.
Monday night.
And I'm excited to see those two games. But that's all the time we have today. If you'd like to keep up with Zach or myself, make sure to follow us on Twitter at YZ Sports Hour or on our own personal Twitter pages. And if you'd like to listen to this broadcast again, we'll have it on our YouTube page later this week. So we want to thank you for tuning into our show on this sunny Friday night, October 21st. For my co-host, Zach Keilman, my name's Yash Padhye. Have a great rest of your night.